Meet PitchDB, the ultimate platform for speakers looking to make their mark on podcasts, conferences, and media outlets. PitchDB provides access to over 3 million platforms, ensuring you find the perfect avenue for your message. With AI integrations, your bios and pitches are tailored uniquely to each opportunity, giving you the edge you need. Join now at pitchdb.com.
Welcome to Your Brand Amplified, the podcast where we interview marketers, publicists, and brands to learn their stories, what makes them tick, and tips and tricks that make a difference. This is Annika Jackson on Your Brand Amplified, and I have the pleasure of having Chester Santos, the International Man of Memory. Bet you weren't expecting that twist. Chester, I'm so thrilled to have you here and to explain to us, what does it mean to be the International Man of Memory?
Thank you so much for having me, Annika. I'm looking forward to talking with you today and sharing some tips that I think your audience will find valuable as they develop some new skills for the new year. I won the United States National Memory Championship. That's how I got started in my career. And since winning that, I've gone on to give presentations in more than 30 different countries on how anyone can develop powerful memory skills and leverage those skills for more success in their career, personal life. Also, if anyone listening happens to have any kids or grandkids in school, some of the tips that I share today will be useful for them as well. But really, that's how I started. I won the U.S. Memory Championship, started speaking, writing on the topic of memory skills. Now it's been 15 plus years since I've started, and I've been all over the world as the International Man of Memory.
When you first entered that competition, did you grow up? Did you always have an exceptional memory? Was it a skill that you had developed? Was a little bit of both? What led you to that path of saying, you know what, I'm going to go for this competition, and then winning it, and then being able to create an entire livelihood out of it?
So growing up, I would often get the comment from people, wow, you have a really good memory. And one night I was flipping channels and I happened to catch a segment on ABC's 2020, that evening news program. They had a segment on the United States National Memory Championship, and it sparked my interest just because people had been saying that I have a good memory. So I thought maybe I could do well in the competition. But when I looked into what the best people in the country were scoring in the various events, memorizing hundreds of computer-generated random digits, hundreds of names, decks of playing cards perfectly in just minutes, I found out that I wasn't quite on that level, although I probably was above average to begin with. So I started doing research. How can one improve their memory from where it currently is at? I played around with a bunch of different techniques, found what seemed to work best for me personally, stuck to training myself in that subset of techniques until eventually I was able to win the U.S. Memory Championship. And since then, I've been training people around the world in the small subset of techniques that I feel really anyone can learn and put to use right away in basically for professional, personal development and to help kids in school.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate that because, I mean, I have a daughter who's in high school. This is finals week right now when we're doing this interview. And I know that some kids have to study hard. Some kids cram it in. Some have better memories than others and work with flashcards or what have you. I know that for kids, you think about memory. And as you get older, there are a lot of articles and things that come up about how to improve your memory, what vitamins to take or exercises you can take, games you can play, things like that. But I don't know that we have really considered it as something, as you're stating, a tool that we really need to move forward in our careers, in our lives, and just have better memories and be able to be more productive through that. So I'd love for you to talk about how you realized that your memory and the way that you worked through these exercises, right, to become the winner yourself would be useful for other people. Because I know, like, when you're looking at different techniques, whether it's for marketing, there's so many different things people can do, but not everything's going to work for everybody. So I love your expertise and the fact that you've gone on this journey. You have a bestseller book, you speak in all these different countries, sharing these techniques and helping people get better. So will you talk us through some of why it's important, the why, and then how did you get your first job speaking, your first keynote speaker gig?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to memory, a lot of people don't realize that it's something that can be improved. Yet we talk about it's pretty common to hear about presentation skills, negotiation skills,
Right.
marketing skills, math skills, memory. So that is my area. I market myself as a memory skills expert because, in fact, it is a skill, learning to remember names, learning to give presentations without notes, learning to better remember training material that your company has you go through, right? It is a skill, and it isn't that hard to develop your memory skills, and the whole process can really be a lot of fun. I'll get into the principles later and specific training later when you want me to, but for now, how did I get that first keynote gig? Well, upon winning the United States Memory Championship, automatically I got booked to be on a lot of different TV shows. I was interviewed for various newspapers, magazines. So I had all of this media quoting me as far as my tips. How can someone else improve their ability to remember things? What was it that you learned that helped you to win this US Memory Championship? So I then leveraged that toward marketing myself as a speaker. And in the beginning, I did some gigs for very low fees or just for expenses. For instance, I was a speaker at Harvard University for the Harvard Graduate Council, and I did that only for travel expenses is all they covered for that. But then I was able to put in my marketing materials that, hey, I've been a speaker at Harvard University. So I slowly built up my resume in that way until eventually I was able to charge just higher and higher fees as time went on for my keynote presentation. So hopefully that answers how I got started in terms of keynote speaking. And again, I have plenty of specific memory tips to give for your audience when we're ready to get into that.
Yeah, I think we're almost there, but I want to hear about your book as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about your book and all of the things that came out of that as well as part of your brand?
So I've actually written 2 books at this point. Instant Memory Training for Success was the first book. And then the most recent one is Mastering Memory Techniques to Turn Your Brain from a Sieve to a Sponge. Now, those book deals somehow just came in from me speaking and, people interviewing me for various things because I didn't actively seek those out. Editors had actually come to me. Nice. And from some big New York publishers. My first book is published by John Wiley & Sons, which is one of the top 5 academic publishers in the world. And then my second one is published by Sterling, which is owned by Barnes & Noble. So it's in all the Barnes & Noble stores around the US. And those really allowed me to reach a wider audience than I can possibly do with speaking engagements. I mean, speaking engagements, sometimes I have hundreds or thousands of people, but with the books, I'm able to really reach millions of people around the world.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'd like for you to talk through, because I think these are things that you talk through when you're keynote speaking. It's also what you have in your book, and you also have memory school, right? You have a course that people can take. So I'd love for you to tease out some of the things, techniques, because I know you wanted to have this be a little bit interactive with myself and with our listeners and viewers who are watching and listening. So I'd love for you to use some of your techniques on us. Let us know what's the secret.
Cool. Yeah. So you outlined some of the ways that people can learn from my teachings. Books are one way. There is an online course if you want more interactive training, fun interactive exercises. But no matter the medium, some of the core principles that I will always cover will be, one, that visuals are very powerful. So no matter what type of information you want to remember, if you can turn it into something that you can picture in your mind, something you can see, it will be easier to remember. Now, in terms of applying that to give people a better idea of what I'm talking about, in terms of remembering names, I try to turn people's names into a powerful visual. Like if I'm meeting someone named Mike, I might picture a microphone. If I'm meeting someone named Alice, I might picture a white rabbit, because that reminds me of Alice in Wonderland. This is effective because oftentimes we are able to remember people's faces, what they look like, but it's more difficult to remember names, right? So if you go to a party, you're meeting a lot of new people, A week or two after that, your friend that was also there says, "Hey, Annika, do you remember that attorney that we met a couple of weeks ago at the party? He's a member of the golf club." As your friend's describing the person, a lot of times you can picture who they're talking about. You might even be able to call up in your mind what the person was wearing when you met them, but the name is what we tend to blank out on, right? Because we're good at remembering things that we see. So we want to leverage the power of visual memory and apply that, link it to names. And one way is to come up with a visual representation of the name.
Nice.
The second principle to always keep in mind, no matter what specific memory technique you end up using, is that you want to involve more senses as you can after you have a visual. So involve smell, taste, touch, because as you activate more senses when trying to encode information to memory, you're going to be activating more areas of your brain, and you'll be building more connections in your mind to the information, making it easier to retrieve it later. So don't just see the white rabbit. Imagine that you can smell the white rabbit. Maybe you're petting the white rabbit, feeling its soft fur. That's all going to make everything more memorable. You're using more of the brain without realizing it. And then the third and final principle is, while you're doing all of this, make it crazy, unusual, extraordinary if you can, because there's a psychological aspect to human memory that affects all of us. If wherever you all are at listening to this podcast episode right now, if an elephant were to crash into the room that you're in at this moment and it started to spray water all over you with its trunk, if that actually happened right now, you'd probably remember that for the rest of your life without any effort at all. No effort to try to commit that to memory. 40 years from now, you might be saying that you were listening to Annika's podcast and an elephant crashed in the room. It would just be stuck there. Scientists don't even understand how that works in the brain as of today. But we just need to realize that there is this aspect to human memory, the psychological aspect, that sometimes allows information to go straight into long-term memory, stay there forever with little to no effort. So we want to harness that when we're trying to remember speeches, presentations, names, training material. We want to try to harness that. So make things crazy, unusual, extraordinary in your mind as you're seeing and experiencing all of this imagery. Those are the three principles. Very simple, actually, and fun, believe it or not, to put into practice. And they really will help you to be better able to remember things.
So I'd love for you to walk us through an example of how you use these techniques for your memory, or somebody who went through one of your programs or saw you keynote speak and had their aha moment.
Sure. So I'll go through an interactive exercise here for your audience, and then we can go over how that would actually be applied in real life to, say, some sort of business situation, okay? Where I'm going to have you all, without writing anything down while you're listening to this, you can't write down these words, you can't use an electronic device to help you. I know people aren't used to this nowadays, but I'm going to have you all commit to memory the following random list of words. It's going to be monkey, iron, rope, kite, house, paper, shoe, worm, envelope, pencil, river, rock, tree, cheese, and dollar. Now, people might be thinking, there's no way I'm going to commit that to memory, not unless you give me a lot of time to do it. But in fact, everybody listening to this will have all of those words down perfectly, forwards and backwards, in just about 3 minutes of time. That's it. And without any further review, even weeks after listening to this podcast, you'll still know all of those words forwards and backwards. We're just going to keep those three principles in mind that I briefly went over, and I'm going to guide you through some visuals here, right? And just relax, have fun, I promise. This is easy, and it should be a good time for everyone. I want for you all to visualize a monkey, because that was the first word that I had mentioned. I want for you to see a monkey. It's dancing around, making monkey noises, whatever a monkey would sound like. I'm working on the monkey impression, but the point here is to really see and hear that monkey. You can do this with your eyes open or closed if your environment allows you to do that at this moment. Try your best to visualize that monkey dancing around, making monkey noises. The monkey now picks up a gigantic iron, maybe like you would iron your clothes with, because that was the second word I had given you, iron. So just see this monkey dancing around with this giant iron. The iron starts to fall, but a rope attaches itself to the iron. And you feel the rope. Maybe it feels sort of rough. Really interact with it. that rope. You look up the rope and you see that the other end of the rope is attached to a kite. The kite is flying around in the air, and maybe you reach up even and try and touch that kite, all right? The kite you see now crashes into the side of a house. Picture that, really see it smash into the house. House was the next word I had given you. You notice the house is completely covered in paper. Picture that as best you can. See that paper. Out of nowhere, a shoe appears and it starts to walk all over that paper. Maybe it's messing it up as it's walking on it. See that shoe. The shoe smells pretty badly, so you decide to investigate and see why. And you find a worm crawling around in there. Really see the smelly worm crawling around inside of the shoe. The shoe, out of the shoe, the worm jumps out and it goes into an envelope. Okay, picture that. Really see it go into the envelope. Maybe it's going to mail itself or something, I don't know. But just see it go into the envelope. Out of nowhere, a pencil appears and starts to write all over the envelope. Really see that pencil. Maybe it's addressing it. Picture the pencil. The pencil now jumps into a river and there's a huge splash for some reason. When that pencil hits the river, you notice is crashing up against a giant rock. This rock flies out of the river and it crashes into a tree. This tree is growing cheese. You probably haven't seen a tree like that before. This one is growing cheese. And out of the cheese shoots $1. The last word I had given you was dollar. So just see $1 coming out of the cheese. That was it. Some people might be able to rattle these off already, but I'm going to go through this again very quickly in about 20, 30 seconds. And your job is to simply replay through this little story in your mind, see it as best you can. We started off with the monkey. The monkey was dancing around with, I want you to see that iron. What then attached itself? A rope. Feel the rope. You look up the rope, the other end was attached to the kite. The kite crashes into, see the house. What was that house covered in? It was covered in, see the paper. Something walked on that paper. I want you to see that shoe. What was small crawling in there? It was a worm crawling inside of the shoe. See the worm. The worm jumped into the envelope. Watch it go into the envelope. What was writing on the envelope? See the pencil. The pencil jumped into the river. The river was crashing up against the rock. That rock flew into a tree. See it crash into the tree. The tree was growing cheese. And what came out of it? It was $1. So now it should be fairly easy for people to recall the entire random list of words by simply going through the story in your mind. Each major object that you encounter in the story is going to give you the next random word. So I encourage people to do that, try it at a minimum, recite it to themselves, see how far they get. And if there are any blanks anywhere, you'll simply run through the visual story again, and probably in just one or two more run-throughs, you will have it solid. And once you do, this will stay there for weeks. And if you simply review that story weeks later, it will stay there for months and maybe even longer. So hopefully people enjoy that exercise.
Wow. That was really fun. I really enjoyed the way that you walked us through that. And I can see how it's a really useful technique, because for me, I am a visual learner, but I also need to hear it. I need to write it. I need to see like all of the different senses. So I can see how that would be really effective in helping us increase our memories.
Definitely. And this doesn't apply to only random words. That's just the easiest way to get started with this. But a quick application of that's called the story method. So it's just one of many techniques that a memory champion like myself would use to pull off what at first seem like extraordinary feats of memory, but there's really nothing different about my brain compared to anybody else's. I've just learned these techniques that are powerful and effective. We could apply that to a presentation or meeting with clients, potential clients. You want to be able to say, hey, in my research, here are 5-10 key things that I learned about you and your company. Here are 5 to 10 key ways as to why myself and my services are a perfect match. Here are 5 things that I learned about what your competitors are doing. When you can do this and maintain eye contact with the person, just show that you know your stuff. It is very, very impressive, especially in today's business world, in which, if we're honest with ourselves, the average business professional cannot do this without shuffling through a lot of notes, because we've become so digitally dependent, outsourcing our memory to electronic devices. So a presentation, if I were to talk about healthcare in the US, my first image might simply be of a stethoscope that the doctor uses to check your heartbeat. That's just going to remind you that today's discussion will be about healthcare. First talking point might be high cost of healthcare in the US. You might just have a bunch of $100 bills shooting out of the stethoscope. Next thing you might want to touch on with the audience under current healthcare programs in order to get certain things covered. Sometimes we need to cut through or navigate through a lot of red tape. Maybe wrapping itself around the $100 bills is all of this red tape. So I hope that makes things more clear as to how you could apply that to a presentation or meeting with a client, potential client wanting to better demonstrate the research that you've done and your knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, thank you. I love this. So I want to take it back a little bit because I want to find out, I'm sure you didn't know this is going to end up being your career and your livelihood. What did you want to pursue before you became the International Man of Memory?
So I've actually been through quite a lot of schooling. I always did really well in school. I think having a good memory to begin with definitely was an advantage there. So my undergrad degree was in psychology. I went to Berkeley in San Francisco Bay Area. And I originally pursued psychology. It ended up being really good, and that is perfectly related to what I'm doing now. We learned about learning, memory, and cognitive and biological psychology over at Berkeley. But the idea was at first to apply that just as a pre-law degree. And I went to law school at the University of California, Hastings. And when I got there, I realized, well, I already knew, to be honest, that reading and writing, although I did really well in those subjects, they weren't my favorite topics. I was more interested probably in science, but I was only at the time looking into, okay, what's the shortest route to making six figures if you're good in school? And at the time, that was one of the shortest routes because law school was only 3 years. And then if you got hired at a good firm, you would make a six-figure salary. Whereas business school, they want you to have years of experience first before you even apply to the graduate schools of business a lot of times. So it's a longer route. And then medicine is 4 years instead of 3 years. And then you have to do a residency. So I was not paying attention to what I was necessarily passionate about. Oh, wow. It was just to, how can I make a six-figure income being in that I'm a good student? But when I got to law school, I was completely miserable. I could not stand it at all. And so I ended up dropping out and going into something that I was a little bit more interested in, science. So I ended up getting a master's degree in software engineering, and I worked as a software engineer in Silicon Valley. So that's actually what I was doing. I was working as a software engineer when I saw that segment on ABC's 2020, which led to where I'm at now. So I already told that part of the story.
Yeah. That's remarkable because it seems so unrelated, but I love hearing people's backstories because I feel like everything we do helps us be who we are today and get to that point. And I'm sure, I mean, when I think about software engineering specifically, I'm thinking about, okay, it's kind of like the way the brain makes all these connections, right? But you're coding it and you're creating other ways for connections to be made via the computer. So it has a lot of implication for what you ended up doing. And as the International Man of Memory, how has your life changed? You talked about travel. I know you're on the road right now. I've looked at your Instagram and it seems like, almost every few days you're somewhere different speaking and engaging in workshops. So I'd love to hear about that. And does that ever get tiring for you?
It never gets tiring. I absolutely love it. I feel so lucky to be doing what I'm doing now. When I was working in the Silicon Valley area for various tech companies, I developed a hobby actually performing close-up magic. And when there was some sort of annual holiday party, I would end up performing magic tricks. And I think that helped me to make the transition because I developed a love of performing. Yeah. So it really helped me to be comfortable on stage in front of large audiences. And so I really do love performing. I'll open presentations now with naming hundreds of people in the audience after hearing each name just one time. So there is a performance factor. And then I get into how the audience can improve their own ability to remember things. So it's a lot of fun, and it's brought me to more than 30 different countries just for bookings. And when you combine personal and professional, I've visited more than 50 different countries at this point. So it's been really a life-changing experience going into what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And do you see yourself continuing down this road? Do you have something in your mind for your what next?
I really just want to continue doing, at this point, just doing more of what I've been doing. I really cannot imagine myself enjoying any other profession more than this.
Yeah, fantastic. So will you walk us through a little bit about Memory School? Is it is it modules that people can watch?
Sure. So pre-pandemic, I was much more focused on in-person training. So I was, in addition to speaking engagements, doing 1 and 2 day workshops that were open to people in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then also corporate training workshops around the country, around the world. But I had to transition during COVID, and now I've been much more focused on online training. So that is memoryschool.net is the URL. People can imagine maybe a giant fishing net to remember that it's .net. So that's the best place to visit for online training. And that really allows me to reach an even bigger audience. I cover memory fundamentals, is what I like to call it, techniques that will apply to any information type and that will apply to improving your memory in general. I cover specific techniques for numbers, anything with numbers, facts, figures, passwords, dates, so on. Foreign language vocabulary. You'll learn Korean in my workshop and learn how to apply the techniques to learning any foreign language. We learn a wide variety of techniques for presentations. We'll do sample presentations. There's training material that will help you to get more out of professional development. And then also it applies to kids in school to cut their study time in half, improve their retention, and also provide them with a much more fun and interesting framework to use. What I've just described is only the core training. Then there's advanced training and there's ongoing training uploaded periodically as well. So people can check it out. Again, memoryschool.net. I set up code ANIKA for your audience. It's set to be valid for 50 uses. So the first 50 people to use code ANIKA will have the $200 enrollment fee wiped out for them on the checkout screen. So please check it out. Get on it right away if you happen to be interested in developing memory skills for the new year.
Fantastic. And that will also be in the show notes for everybody. And I'll also definitely want to be sharing that in my newsletter and some other places as well. So
that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been really fun. I'm really excited to continue following your journey on the social medias and learning more about all the things that you're putting into the world. Because again, this is a topic obviously we haven't covered on the podcast. I think we've had one person talk about memory in a very different way, but we've never had anybody like you. And so, Chester, I just thank you for bringing your presence to my podcast, sharing some of the techniques that people can use to remember and increase and improve their memories. And then could they go to your website, internationalmanofmemory.com, also to see where you might be speaking next and other things that they can engage with you?
Definitely. That's going to be the better website for speaking engagements, internationalmanofmemory.com. And for training, it's memoryschool.net.
Fantastic. And I always want to ask if you have one last word of wisdom that you'd like to leave with us, and do you have a favorite quote or mantra, some words of wisdom that you live by?
Yeah. So my final, closing statement is that I really hope people realize after this interview that memory is something that really can be developed. You can develop your memory skills. And if you'll do so, it's going to help you in professional development. It'll help you to build better relationships with people, get more out of networking by better remembering names. And there are so many other benefits. I hope that message came across clearly today. And really, a closing thought is that, the best investment that you can make really is in yourself. an investment in yourself pays the best interest. And I totally believe that. I'm always trying to develop my skills in other areas. And I hope people realize that that will pay off for them in just about any career, any business in the long run.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate your time. And I want to thank our audience also for watching or listening in this episode of Your Brand Amplified. And I'll be back again in a few days with another amazing expert to share their tips and tricks and techniques to help us all live better lives. So Chester, thank you again. Really appreciated having you on today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Annika.
Want more? Check out amplifywithannika.com or follow me on socials at amplifywithannika.